Welcome to the freezer, the Ambassador Ballroom. Do what you need to do to keep warm. My name is Jessica McJunkins, but my artist name is Lady Jess, so that's what's on all the badges and in all the programs. But after this panel, when we talk, just call me Jess. I am so happy to be here. When Afa approached me about this panel, I was really excited because she kept it pretty open-ended, and the one thing that I think I wanted to discuss the most was exactly this topic. Things are changing in our world socioeconomically, politically, so quickly, and it means that the landscape that students enter when they leave conservatory changes all the time. It's very dynamic, much more so than it was when I was coming out of school. And it begs the question, what is the need? What is the virtue? What is the importance of attending conservatory versus university, of attending any college or university after high school at all? I know so many colleagues who are in graduate degree programs and leaving them, happily so. Why? That's something that was also very different from when I was in school. So I have Dr. Chelsey Green to my left here. And yeah, let's give it up. And I have Lizzie Steiner, amazing harpist. And I think I'd just like to get right into it. If you guys, before you answer the questions, just briefly let them know what you'd like for them to know about yourself, your work, whatever you like to know, even if it's just a random fact, that's cool too. And then we'll get right into the answers. All right. The act of entering the world of academia or formal study, is it still as noble as it originally was in your mind and or as it was presented to you? Chelsey, I'd like to start with you.
I'm starting. Is that okay?
Oh, yes.
Okay. It's still as noble. I believe that entering into academia is essentially entering into an option. And that is how I think the nobilization of it is, or however you want to color it in your mind. When we are maturing, your maturation is going to demand options. It's going to demand that you be versatile. It's going to demand that you have a nimble and malleable attitude. And I feel like that's a big part of what higher ed teaches you, especially when you are a person of color in a classically based, institutionalized, systemic program.
Absolutely.
And so I believe that there's a certain training that you don't see on your transcript that's going to end up getting you paid. And for me, that is the blessing that comes out of the challenge that we deal with, in these programs. So I do believe that there is still a noble quality to it. Do I believe that it's different from what life gives you if you go straight into that path either? Absolutely not, because that's another training ground as well.
And could you give us just a little bit about your background or what you're doing right now?
Oh my goodness. I mean,
because she's doing everything.
I just kind of, Well, I am a violist, a violinist, a vocalist. I have my own touring contemporary jazz ensemble, Chelsey Green and the Green Project, and we perform and tour internationally. But then also, I'm a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I teach violinists, saxophonists, pianists, cellists, vocalists. I teach everyone across the performance division in a variety of different classes that range from entrepreneurship to solo private instruction to improvisation and theory techniques and arranging.
Chelsey has worked with Lizzo, DJ D-Nice, and a host of other artists that I would really like for you all to know. All right, so Lizzie, was there a landmark moment in your college experience when you knew what your vision was for your future career? And if so, what did that look like?
There was no major moment. It was many small little moments that were very inward, and no one really saw any of the fruits of it at the time. My harp teacher, Yolanda Conanassa, she asked me, she had all of us doing projects constantly, and one every year it was either a composition or a transcription project. And this was such a minor thing, but I did that transcription, and she took note of it and just said, you know, you're really good at this, and you seem so engaged and inspired in a way I haven't, you know, it's a new lane for you. Like, where did this come from? And it was so personal to me and so useful, very practical. Like, and now I had a new score that was my own, that I studied it, and then I transcribed it. I made it into something that was just for me. When I played it, I was like, I have so much ownership over this, as compared to many other scores I had. You know, you learn every score, you're assigned everything in the repertoire, right? But finally I had something for me, and that was just this little moment that now with what I'm doing, that was the seed back then.
Yeah, so do you feel that she, as an educator, helped you to give yourself permission to do something that the institution at large made you less valid as a classical musician? Does that make sense?
We're just gonna go there right now.
We're ninjas, you know, we're here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and you know, to the question that you posed to Chelsey too, it's like the study is so, committing yourself to studying music so deeply is incredibly noble.
Yes.
Because there's so few college paths where anyone is that committed.
Yeah, it's true.
If you're getting a degree in music, performance, or any of the specialties, or anything, you're committing to something so much more deeply than many other people at your age or in your path. And that, to me, is very noble. But then the institution, for better or for worse, can often cloud that spark, that love that you had for what it is you're doing. So then these moments of permission, of granting, here's something you can do that is going to be personal to you, is going to be so, you're just going to bring yourself right back into why you're there.
Absolutely.
And you're not letting yourself, I mean, it's very easy to be overwhelmed if you're in a conservatory or in a university.
Yeah. Keeping that, 100%. And in thinking about my own experiences as an educator, I think about how, I wouldn't say obsessed, but it definitely was very fixed on the idea of ensuring that my students at any age, at any grade level, felt a sense of ownership over their personal practice. And in learning how to play the instrument, they also learned how to develop learning skills that were tailored to them as individuals. And I found that it was a more efficient way for them to learn the craft, but it also instilled an extra level of joy. And I think, you know, as part of this panel and thinking about this panel, I definitely wanted people to walk away with ideas on how to be that ally to students or mentorees that you work with. And to that end, Dr. Green, if you were to construct or even just think of just part of a model curriculum for a, I would say, undergraduate level student trying to decide between going directly into the workforce and going to pursue a graduate degree, what would that look like?
I love that question because I was so taken when you all just said studying music.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That is so nuanced.
I know.
And I think so often we slip past the layers that really entails. Because if you're going in just to learn rep, are you studying the core of what the music is really trying to or could give you? You know, and I remember in one of my DMA classes, he made us do essentially a harmonic analysis of of different parts. So like I studied viola for my DMA, so I would always have to analyze cello parts or a bass part and then transcribe it for my instrument. And that gave me an awareness of the bottom line that I didn't have as a violinist or a violist. And I think that is what it really started getting me cooking on, dang, well, I'm actually diving in a little deeper here. So for me, a model curriculum includes music history that is applicable to what I want to go into. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, I am a Christian and I believe in the Bible and I believe ain't nothing new under the sun. And when we look at historical texts that give us parables and stories in that way, we can look at music history and see where our own ancestors have gone through some of the exact same, all of the same things that we're going through. And I get very emotional about going into venues now where we get to walk through the front door, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, like
100%.
we're playing and we're going on these stages where they had to wait in the kitchen before they got on stage. So I think that the model curriculum to me is going to include some arranging. It's going to include some improvisation.
Yes.
It's going to include some ability to read clefs other than yours, including transposing wind parts. Do you know what this instrument, you know, where their C lies? It's going to include having to collaborate with instrumentalists that are not your own. So, you know, you are working with maybe like all of us could be in a study group where we're learning different things about, you know, either the symphonic layout or a big band chart. Being able to read a lead sheet, just like you can read your own part in a symphony.
No, but that's actually invaluable.
It's just, I mean, how many times have you been in a tour rehearsal, in a studio where there was no string part and you're here in
on
a
napkin, taking a credit card and making my staff paper.
Making your,
yes, and coming together as a core unit of like four. Never having arranged, all four, never having arranged.
Come on.
Many of whom I think about the first time I played a gig with a very major recording artist, and the process was to suddenly, as a string section, never having met, no less played together, arrange full string charts for the show.
The day before the show?
The day before the show.
Look, come on, we preach it, come on.
The day before the show.
In the studio where they maybe are indulging on some things that
they can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want, and you're on demand coming up with you're on demand composing. You're on
and it
demand
feels
arranging.
awful, and it's in those moments that you go, man, I wish I knew how to do this before I walked in this room, because it would have saved me 6 hours of time. It would have saved me in energy. Yep. It would have saved time, like getting to know colleagues that I otherwise would have really liked and immediately couldn't stand because we were locked in this room doing this thing that none of us knew how to do.
And it made it, I'm sure after you did that the first time, because we do it all the time, right?
Yes.
It started making you listen to music differently.
You hear everything differently.
You hear everything differently, and you start to hear how arranging can happen in listening, and then how much more efficient the process can be.
100%. So we're going to swing to you, Lizzie, and kind of switch it up a little bit. You know, I love putting Lizzie on the spot because she's just the best. Does the choice of university versus conservatory carry the weight it did when it was presented to you by colleagues, parents, or educators? Do you feel that it still carries that same weight for students contemplating that choice as it did when we were coming up?
I believe that it does not.
I don't either. Why do you say that?
It matters.
Yeah.
Because the sessions you both just described, when we're in the room and the artist says, I don't have a part for this, but I want you on this track. What just play something.
Yeah.
And your training, your ear, your ability to give something great in that moment, has nothing to do with where you went to school.
Yes.
It does not matter.
100%.
How for students though contemplating, you want to know what environment you want to be in, and you should, I think, visit as many places as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Study with all the teachers before you take an audition,
Mm-hmm.
so you get yourself in the building and you observe the environment. Do you want to be at a university? Do you want to have other classes you can take? Do you want to have a normal college experience, or do you want to be in a conservatory and be in the very... Actually, I wouldn't even say that they're even that much different of an environment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just school to school,
Yeah.
a teacher to teacher, studio to studio.
Yeah.
So you just really, the more research you do, if you can get the resources, if you can get scholarships, sponsors, people to get you to go to those places.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I knew I wanted to go to school, because I entered the building and I felt good where I was.
Yes.
But it hadn't been my first choice up until then. I thought I wanted to go to this other school because I had read all about it.
Mm-hmm.
It had all the facts.
Mm-hmm.
It had the name. It had all this stuff. And I was like, no. I went there and I was like, no, I'm not going. I don't want to.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right to me. And you're going to spend 4 years or 2 years or even longer at this institution, this place. You want to feel good about it. So go where you feel good. And then know it also doesn't matter where you go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in your career. Like,
it's true, and I think I know that I speak to educators at the high school and college level, and a lot of them express a bit of overwhelm at just how fast things are changing and being able to keep up with trends and knowing what platforms are people are using, who's canceled, who's not, what's okay, what's not. And I think it's more of a perspective situation. I think it's much more flexible. And I think the pressure, instead of being greater on educators to be correct, right or wrong, I think it's more so dissipated. There are so many more options now. And it says a lot more to ask a student what speaks to you. What makes you, where do you feel safe in this learning environment? What will make you feel safe? What excites you? What outside of this particular space of learning excites you, and why? And I think instantly you can establish a sense of ownership over the learning experience. Would you agree?
I mean, absolutely, and I think that just speaks to why it's so integral that you go to a place where you feel good, where you're mentally healthy, you're emotionally healthy, because that is going to precipitate like what happens in your educational experience. If you are not in a place of clarity or wholeness when you go into your lesson every week, if your lesson every week is riddled with anxiety and just trying to measure up to a standard that you feel is impossible, can you imagine the decay over one semester, let alone 4 years of that? So no, I've never been to a session, rehearsal, audition where they asked me to see my transcript. Never in my life.
Never.
Okay.
Not at the highest level.
Yeah. So it's like when you get down to it, it's the person you are. It's humanity first, right? How do you want to share this space with somebody? And then it's what you're able to do with your music.
Exactly. Would either of you like to add anything else before we move into questions? Yeah?
I was going to say on choosing where to go or choosing when to leave.
Right.
Just make sure your financial package is good. Go where you are going to be. It's a good situation for you financially.
Extremely important.
And be aggressive about that. Like, be aggressive about if you get in somewhere else and they give you more money, and you all know this, but you go back and you say, hey, this place gave me more money and I actually want to go to your school. And you can work with them. You have to really architect your future. And the financial part of it will really set your mental health up for success if you feel taken care of and it's a reasonable amount of debt if you have to take that on to go into music school, which is like taking on debt to go into music school, what? Like,
Yeah, I know.
Like, so you have to be very pragmatic about that. And then the teacher is also, you have to know them. You want to feel like they're a safe space for you.
Absolutely. And really quickly, actually, what advice would you give to students who are already enrolled in a degree program and may be, on the face of things, thriving in that program, but actually just need to leave for their mental health or for some other reason? What advice would you give to them? And what advice would you give to an educator who is like, I believe in the system. I believe that I can make the change within the system. And I feel like this, who has a personal investment in a personal stake in this particular student's journey, what kind of advice would you give both to the student and to the educator? Either of you can take it. Yeah.
I think for me, in either case, it's about knowing your resources.
Absolutely.
Knowing who you can reach out to, knowing who you can talk to, because depending on where you are in your program and depending on whether you would want to depart the program or transfer, really be knowledgeable about where you would want to go next, how those transfer credits can work for you. And I would say you want to talk to your advisor. You want to talk, maybe if you don't feel like your immediate private instructor is a safe space, talk to your chair. Talk to your dean. Because ultimately, we are a collective that want to see you succeed. And even if you have a better relationship with another person on the faculty, talk to them. And maybe they'll be able to be a resource. I think for educators, sometimes we can feel, like you said, the overwhelm. That's so real.
Yeah.
It's so real when you're managing a 15-person studio. You have 6 other classes that you're teaching. You're managing your own touring schedule. Okay, I'll stop. But I'm just saying, you are managing, you're juggling, like you're wearing all the hats, right? And then when you are faced with, especially at a school like Berkeley, most of my students play different rep.
Yeah.
Maybe we're doing like a Charlie Parker transcription in one, I'm teaching a Hindemith sonata in the next lesson, then I'm teaching a Fitzgerald and Ella transcription one, then I'm teaching a voice lesson. So every lesson is very nuanced and demands a lot, from the teacher. So you, as the educator, then need to have your own breakaway, and if that means scheduling you an extra office hour, do that. Do that. Find the time to collect yourself and work with your dean, work with your vice president, that, so that you can have some flexibility.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, I think if it's okay with the crew back there, we'd like to move to questions. Yeah, that would be great. So we have the mic here, and then we'll also have some questions coming in from the live stream. So if you could just say your name for us, and we'll get right into it. Hi.
Hello. I'll take this. My name is Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hello. So I was looking at all of your bios, which is super impressive, by the way. You all are so amazing. So my particular question is, considering that you all are pretty versatile in a lot of places and experiences and talents and skills, what advice could you offer to people who are multifaceted and who have different passions for different things? In what ways have you been able to keep those skills fresh so that you're able to enter into those experiences or opportunities, I should say, with, I guess, that bringing that excellence to those opportunities, if that makes sense?
Makes total sense. Would either of you like to jump in? Go ahead.
I would say being multifaceted is an incredible advantage.
Absolutely key.
And speaking back to, being in music school, conservatory, that path, which is so focused, such a straight and narrow path that they present to you, which kind of was just one idea, one career. It's been everything else that they didn't tell me about. It's been, running a nonprofit, teaching, recording, arranging, improvising, composing, fundraising. I mean, the level of business skill you have to run your own career as an artist. We didn't even get into that, and we need a whole nother session for that.
We need another week
and that's
for
what,
that.
It does need to be added to conservatory or to music education, I believe. But it's changing so fast that it's changing every day in the music industry. But it's exciting. It's a great time. It's a great time to be in music. But being multifaceted, you're automatically going to be fresh, right? Like, there's going to be a new thing. Every time I'm on a gig, it's a new skill of mine. I'm like, I didn't know I had that. Like,
no, 100%.
I'm now offering this.
And I think the other important thing about that is that whatever you do, it just needs to be done well. And that comes out of a love for doing it. So for me, the question is, what do I love doing on days that I absolutely don't even want to see the instrument? I don't even want to see the case, like, get out of my sight. Then I'm going to warm up by improvising to whatever I want to listen to. That's how I'm going to warm up my fingers. When I was on tour, I was trying to get used to switching from electric to acoustic, because anybody who plays strings knows the intervals are slightly different. And so I would warm up on my acoustic and then play the show on the electric. And then the next day I would warm up with Chevalier St. George on the electric. And during the show at like downtimes, I would continue to practice like Bach or etudes on the electric and then go back to it on the acoustic. It takes work, but because it felt like I was actively cultivating a muscle that I chose to cultivate, it didn't feel like work or a chore. It really became something that was like very interesting to kind of learn how I learned how to do this thing. And the entire experience was like, I could have had this experience when I was 18. So waste no time in integrating that into your daily practice routine, rehearsal routine. If you're rehearsing with an ensemble, find different ways to warm up. You know, the group scale thing, I have trauma. You know, it's gross. There are other ways. There are multiple ways, you know. But just curate that. You have to curate the way that you're going to ingest the material, if that makes sense. Could we get one of the chat questions, please?
Instructors with interdisciplinary innovative skills without DMA PhD holder can really enliven programs. How can we navigate pushback in institutions, students, and families for having these people on board?
Would you mind repeating that one more time, just a little louder, because we missed the first part?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Instructors with interdisciplinary innovative skills without DMA PhD holders can really enliven programs. How can we navigate pushback in institutions, students, and families for having these people on board?
I really love that question because it speaks to me, being not a DMA or PhD holder, or a master's degree holder. Very much speaks to me because I have a lot of respect for that, and I spent a lot of time kind of wanting to walk that path and take that direction and possibly teach at the college level. And now I couldn't be the furthest from that, but that was something that I had to kind of come to on my own journey. But I like to think that I fell into it. But I fell into that truth by virtue of the diversity of work that I had. Like, I had to be good at this thing, and then I had to pivot and be good at this thing, and then pivot here, because when you start to, my way of networking was work, if that makes sense. And in music, so much now, it's, yes, audition, but the audition experience is over here. I have a very hard time relating to that, even though I function within that system very well. It's very foreign to me, the entire thing. I'm wearing a necklace that says expletive excerpts. So like, it's a whole journey through that. But I understand the need for it, and now I can approach it like a muscle. Yeah, what would you like to add?
You know, it came in nice and
very hot. The mic is hot.
The
It's
mic
hot.
is hot. The mic is hot.
Hot.
I will say that for me, navigating any type of pushback in an educational space, my number one goal is to always go back to the students. At the end of the day, that's why we exist in the first place, right? So what do the students want to be listening to? What do the students want to be practicing? Every day, I might ask 2 or 3 random students, hey, let me see what you were just listening to in your AirPods. Let me check out what's on your playlist.
Yep.
Right? So when you take that to your senior leadership, and then they want to give you pushback about the rep that you teach, you tell them, do you still want enrollment in this program? Do you still want people to be interested in the faculty that you have here? Do you still want us to be engaged? When you talked about being a multifaceted person, like, to me, part of what I wish, my dream is for everyone to kind of like let that idea dissolve. Because we are multifaceted. Our everyday is multifaceted. I always say one of my favorite type of improvisers to listen to and watch do their thing is a single mom.
Absolutely.
Okay? Because they perform that symphony every day flawlessly. Okay?
Yep.
Or a doctor that has to treat different patients that may have similar symptoms but are completely different, right? So we are all multifaceted. We're all going to be challenged with different things, and I think the more our senior leaderships can lock in to the fact that our students need to have access to, yes, I need to be able to play these excerpts well so I can sit in with this symphony. I need to be able to then write original music so that my band can play with the symphony.
100%.
I need to be able to read the score so that I can communicate to the horn section that I need them to play a different note than what the arranger said. You know, I think if you just identify it as being multilingual, that's really what your life is gonna need anyway, you know, when you're juggling everything. So I think that's the way to navigate pushback, is to say, do you still want this enrollment?
100%. All right.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear her.
Hello.
It's on. I think you have to speak really lean in.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Melinda. I'm a flute player from Philadelphia. I'm in my last year at Temple University. I am studying flute performance, as I said, and you know, when I chose flute, I had just chosen it because I had heard it in my household before. No one in my house is a musician, but we're Boricua, and you know, we hear it in salsa. My mom loves Sade, and so you know, she has a lot of flute, and I feel like that was my inspiration for choosing the instrument. But when I got into the education system, I always went to public school. It was only classical music or like rock melodies if you're in like band or whatever. But you know, in my pathway programs for like youth orchestra, I just got forced into this box of classical music, which was honestly never even in my plan to begin with. But I mean, I love it. I really do. I've grown to love the experience of orchestra and playing in one.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like sometimes I'm very conflicted because I feel like I'm missing a whole part of myself, and it's not even accepted or acknowledged at these institutions. And you know, even thinking about stability, like having health insurance or 401ks, like how to make that happen and how to have like be an entrepreneur out in the world and like make these things feasible is never talked about at my school. At my, you know, this is an institution that's highly regarded, has a very good music program.
Mm-hmm.
I studied with a very talented flute player who was, you know, a childhood prodigy, and she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I don't know how to arrange my own music, and that's something I'm deeply interested in. Like, a lot of my friends don't go to school for music or study it classically and have, you know, their own songs. They're signed to a record label, and they want me and my friends to play on their tracks and, you know, put me on the spot, like you said.
Yeah.
It's like a lot, and I just wish that we had more mentorship in schools. How do you recommend students that are at PWIs, where most of the students are not interested in it as well, to push for that initiative, to push for that that need that we have for a complete and whole education?
First of all, it's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Either of you want to jump in?
Yeah, well, thank you for that wonderful question.
Billy?
That really is what we're all trying to answer here. I think you can make that change by being it and by starting to play along with your favorite songs. And then maybe you get a gig on Saturday night after orchestra and you're down, I don't know, at Time or South or wherever you're at, and you're doing both. And then other people are gonna be like, hey, Melinda was down there playing, she was amazing, like, wait, like, and then, oh, she was there with the professor from Temple. And that's
It's true,
and
it's
then they're
catnip.
like- and then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
she's on my gig.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, you're making money from the, like, you're not just doing it for fun and because you love it, but that starting to arrange was really, I started doing that in the pandemic, mostly, and I started with Sade. Because I was like, this is my favorite artist, and I'm like, why, let me see if I can just play this on the harp. And then my whole world just exploded. Because it was the most satisfying, beautiful experience. I was so connected, and I needed that classical technique, though. I needed that training.
And that's the other
Because
side.
all those arpeggios are going to be flawless, okay? They're going to be hitting. And then I also need to have listened to R&B and jazz and funk and rap and world music and all of that to know I want the bass line to be like this. I'm going to think like the guitarist on the track in the mid-range, and then I've got the flute lines in the right hand and the thumb, and then I'm going to go up there and do this, you know. And I'm in tune. And the harp is in tune, okay. And then having these arrangements, is just, now I'm called for gigs specifically, huge opportunities that are like, because I send them the set list, and they're like, oh, what can we do to bring you out? I can name a fee that I never thought I would ever command as a classical harpist. I just couldn't.
It's true. And the knowledge, the working knowledge that you have classical training is something that really is a language that is spoken between client and artist. That is how they connect, how to price you, how to look at you and value what you're doing, as opposed to just looking at the harp and being like, oh, it's a harp, and swooning and thinking it's just some pretty like fluffy thing. They actually look at you and they see this is the value. And with that training, the fundamentals that you learn in school, the technique training, all of that, I use it all the time. The first thing I notice when that is off is when I go to play a simple melody line and I'm like, it's not ringing, I don't know. It's because this has been neglected. So there's a balance in all of that, and it takes a certain extra amount of initiative to get to the music, to say I'm going to insert myself into this space, to go to your friends, to say, can I play with you, to also get on a platform and directly message an artist or someone that you look up to and would like guidance from that's not in the school. But like, that's the way of the world. That's the currency. That's the communication. I really tell people, like, skip the email, just like DM me, because otherwise, like, I'm inundated, that's over here. But if you really want to like talk to me, chat with me, here's how to chat with me. And I think it kind of breaks barriers for classical music without classical music having to do anything, which is the opposite of what needs to happen. But again, that's another panel for another day. Yeah. We don't. But thank you for your question. Yeah. Let's take one from the chat.
From Anonymous, is there a certain career breakdown that has worked well for you over time? This is time spent in education versus performance.
Could you say it one more time?
Is there a certain career breakdown that has worked well for you over time? Your time spent in education versus your time spent in performance?
Interesting. Yeah. I'd love to take that. Because there was a point when I was living, well, I do live in New York City, but there was a point years ago where I was freelancing full time and also maintaining a teaching schedule that was like 10-to-1 group classes, one after the other in blocks, and then 2 to 6 private students, and then whatever rehearsal, And I was working up a concerto, writing a cadenza for this. At the same time, I was getting colds like from the kids because my immune system was weak because I was exhausted. And there was a point when I was doing that and also preparing for a New York Phil audition. And that actually requires a full mind-body commitment that I had to be stretched to my absolute limit. By the time I performed the concerto, I was doing it with the flu. Like, it was madness. But I had to, first of all, to maintain like travel schedule and my instrument and my body, I had to do that as an uninsured musician. That is what I had to do. None of my teaching gigs offered benefits, by the way, but it was just at the core of what needed to be done. It was the only like community to artist thing that I saw in New York City that I felt I could stand behind. And during all of that, I was absolutely miserable. And at a certain point, I had to say, I'm not serving the kids. They're the first people who are not benefiting by my presence. I'm actually hurting this situation by not being able to be consistent, being physically unable to show up. I was starting to work with more higher profile artists, and I didn't like subbing out. And so I made the choice to move to freelancing full time. I missed teaching during the pandemic. I taught virtually. I had one student because I really didn't like teaching virtually. But even with that one student, I was teaching her when we started to come out of lockdown. And so I was teaching her like on the Sphinx Virtuosi tour bus. Bill's like, what are you doing? Like teaching in the back of the bus on Zoom, like miserable. And I said, she's not served by this. She's 13. She's over it. I'm over it. And I said, you're over it. And she's like, yes. You know? And so, but the takeaway was that she felt comfortable enough to be honest. And I said, thank you for being honest. And paired her with someone who's more capable and who's actually like in person. She was in Maryland and I was in Brooklyn. And it ended up working out. But the point is that if I had just taken stock and had the awareness to know that I need to prioritize my mental health and I need to prioritize my physical health, then I think all of it would have gone very differently, and I would have saved myself a lot of time and stress. And I would have felt the sense of ownership that I feel now a lot sooner. And so, yeah. Do you guys want to add anything to that? I know. Let's move on to the next in-person question. Thank you so much for that one, by the way. Hi.
Hello, ladies. Well, I'm so fangirling right now, so I'm trying to get the question together. My name is Crystal Williams, and I currently teach at University of Maryland in Baltimore County.
Awesome. Woo, woo, woo. Yes.
I also teach at a performing arts school, and I play when I can.
Great.
But I have a question about studios. In the present time, we are now almost over 2 years post-Black Lives Matter movement. The DEI statements have been written, and I'm acknowledging, like some of us, that there are some changes that have not happened in higher education, especially within schools of music. My question is, what changes should collegiate department chairs, professors, and faculty alike, like myself, implement to address issues of DEIA in private studios?
What a great question. Thank you so much for that. Chelsey, do you want to jump in on
Sure.
this?
I love that question because I think that it's incredible that we have, front page news articles because the symphony is premiering a work by a Black composer. Like, everybody stop. Here we are.
It's their first
It's
time.
their first time. Everyone come. Like, can you imagine? And for me, it's like, for real? It's 2023. This is where we are. And I am very much on board with just doing it. You are I say that your studio is your sanctuary, it's your space, and you want to, at the end of the day, if you're listening to 8 hours of lessons back to back, you want to be involved too. You want to be like, what do I want to listen to today?
100%.
What do I want to play today?
Lightly, Ro.
I want to get that back under my hand. You know what I want you to do next is you see, so you bring the rep in, and because it will be new, they're going to be talking about it to their other friends, and they're gonna be like, yeah, I'm working on this concerto I haven't been, exposed to before, and they're gonna tell their teacher about it, and then you share in your faculty meeting, yeah, I just started them on this Florence Price, and I'm doing this, and it's very normal. It's not an announcement. It's not a movement. It's not a banner. It's no type of, we need to have a season celebration of incorporating this Latinx composer. It's just, they're going to be doing a box suite. They're going to be doing this, and, make it a very normalized experience. And I would also say that, because I'm on the team of saying this genre blending, like, can we just let
It's
that go?
music.
Like, it's just music. So
Music.
it's just music. So if you want to get them going on a transcription from another genre or whatever, do that too. Let them do a little Kreutzer. Let them do a little, and just mix it all up, because then I think they're going to start embracing this idea of being malleable in different spaces much, much earlier.
Yeah.
And when we are all up here talking about mental and emotional health, I need my educators in the room to really lock into that too. Y'all, we need it. We need it really, really in a deeply felt way. And part of it is returning to the passion of making music, right?
Absolutely.
I know a lot of times at the end of your teaching day, you can kind of feel a bit depleted. And you can feel like, have I even made music today, right? So part of that is even your engagement of what rep you're assigning and how you can be involved in that too.
100%. When I went to North Carolina School, the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, for my undergrad, and it was actually an extremely validating experience for me. Before I even knew, had such an acute awareness of the missing things from from the canon, I didn't know, because my teacher, my white teacher, assigned me a piece by William Grant Still and said, I'm gonna learn this with you, and let's just work this out together, because I think I need to add this to my repertoire. Kevin Lawrence is his name. He's a very methodical teacher. We all studied the same pieces in the same order for very specific technical reasons, right? And so he said, I want to put this in the rotation, and I'm having the whole studio do it so I can just get different ideas for fingerings. And it became like a studio thing, and it wasn't talked about outside. It was just a thing that it was just normal. It was completely integrated and immediately integrated into the curriculum. And it changed so much about the way I approached everything else. And when I returned back to the school, that collection had grown immensely. And he'd typed nothing about it on Facebook. There was nothing in the newsletter. But he's the string chair, so he made it happen. And it's locked in now. And I think, it's a combination of both of those. Thank you for that question. Do we have time for another chat question? Awesome. These are such good questions.
How do you expect the job field to change over the next 5 to 10 years?
Whew. Okay, well, anybody have a month for that question? I mean, how can we know? I don't know. I can't predict from this to 3 hours from now what's going to happen on Twitter. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
feel like the pandemic taught us all a really big lesson in that.
Exactly.
I am going to, I decided I was going to do an Instagram post later about, probably next week, about how, or break it up. But about how would you describe your 2020 experience without using the word pivot? That is your challenge. How would you use, or how would you articulate in words your pandemic experience without using the word pivot? Okay, so once you eliminate that, you really start looking at, isn't that what you do every day?
Yeah.
Right? Isn't it how you challenge yourself to move through and to pursue different levels of whatever you're aspiring to do? Because ultimately, there is no end game. Like there's no end goal. Like I think part of the beautiful thing about being a musician is we're always practicing. People get doctorates, but like a JD, a Juris Doctor, they practice law. A medical doctor practices medicine. We practice music. So we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing, and I think, the industry is necessitating change due to technologies, right? So being more aware about technologies, even like for how many classical conservatory programs have a class about digital audio workspaces, about DAWs, about Ableton and Logic and Pro Tools?
I don't know.
How many classical conservatories?
Because the people, the students I know that know about that, learned about it themselves, took the initiative to go online and found what they needed to know, or they asked colleagues. And I should also say that as educators, it's important to remember that we're just literally, like, the act of being a human is learning always. And I think the idea that there should be some sort of hierarchy really it may be time for that to take a back seat, because it should be this flow, this exchange of ideas that allows for the type of flexibility that we all learned we had to have economically in our careers, in our personal lives. Like, I learned epic amounts of flexibility over the last 3 years that are now serving me very well, but that is the reality of where we are. And I think as long as everybody accepts that and is assertively aware of that, I think it serves the greater space both ways. All right. Hi. Hello. Jennifer.
Roman, I work with Houston Grand Opera now, and I wrote down my question. I always try to tell myself and my colleagues that we are preparing young people for a future we'll never see. And I appreciate how each of you is centering your students in your approach to the work. Is there something you are learning from your students now about where the field of music and music education is going that we all need to be ready for?
Wow, amazing.
What about you, Lizzie?
Well, I have some of my own students in the audience, which is just so meaningful for me. I can't. I'm not gonna cry.
That's very cool, though. Thank you guys for coming.
But I live in Philly, and there's an amazing tradition of community music schools, community music programs that are just breaking down the walls to allow for talented children to have full access to excellent music education. And my approach has always been, I've been so lucky to have this incredibly high level of training from the best harpists I could ever imagine to study with. And I'm gonna give them the same, and I'm holding them to that standard. And that is the greatest gift you can give a student, I believe, is just to say, I see that you can rise to this level, which will be the highest level. And they just take off. And at the same time, though, you also want to work individually with them on their path. What do they want? How will music live in their lives? I always say you'll have this for your whole life. You'll always be a harpist. And you can always come back to it. You can go to business school. You can get a medical degree, which many people do. And it's like, if you can commit to music, you can study anything
You actually
else.
can study anything.
You are very bright. You are very committed and you're very bright.
Yes.
So I would just say, and then in terms of the career in the field, it's really changing. Just the way I would play a wedding gig now is so different than I would
100%.
play it
Oh my
10
gosh.
years ago.
Yeah.
And then I think what's still the same is, I would say, orchestra work, subbing, freelancing. That scene is fairly similar from how I was in school, but all the studio work. And to add to the previous point about gatekeepers, there are none. You can go online, you can buy a course on whatever Skillshare.
Literally.
I was just gonna say that
Master
earlier.
class.
I was on there trying to learn Ableton.
100%. Yep.
Being a producer.
And I was gonna say that earlier to the young lady that came up about talking about classes that are not offered at their school, but you're very interested in. I promise you, if you tell your chair that you went online to study from another university,
It will
something
appear.
that's not offered here,
A course
it
will
change.
appear.
It will be there next semester. I you know, so that you want to talk about implementism, change. Okay, that's that. But I think that to Jennifer's question about what I'm learning from my students, it is fascinating to see what inspires them, to see what gets them going, as opposed to what was getting me studying when I was their age. Is simply fascinating. And I think that has been such a blessing because it's opening me up to a world that I didn't, like, that's not my normal lens. And I think if we can, as educators in college spaces, conservatory spaces, be accepting of it. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything. I'm not saying that you have to support it or validate it. If you can just accept it and just take it for the bare just core of what inspires them, at least it's information. And that's what we need, you know, is more information. So I just think listening and actually embracing that is so powerful in just your relationship and getting them to actually learn from you.
I agree. In the work with Urban Playground Chamber Orchestra, I curated an educational program that was based around the idea of playlists. And before I worked with the students, because I had a limited amount of time with them, but I think there were like 20 that we were working with, and it was all on Zoom. So before I met them, because I hate Zoom, they hate Zoom. Everybody hates Zoom. Like, this is at the height of, like, people are like,
Zoom got that filter.
I reserve the right to turn off my camera. Like, people were making we were at that level of lockdown. And so I was like, man, I'm going to have to really figure out a way to kind of, like, soften the course before I even get there, because I just didn't want to waste any time. And so I had them all create a playlist. The parameters were, make me a playlist. I don't care how long it is or how short it is. Just keep in mind that you need to give some sort of explanation for why each thing is on your list. Why is this the one thing? Like, if you could make a playlist for the end of the world, like, what would be on it? And these were late middle school age kids. They had Queen, they had Broadway musicals, they had Nicki Minaj, they had everything, like, on the same list. And my playlist looked like that, and I've been told by people that mine are insane. But, like, those people are other adults. But these kids were coming in with that already just out the gate. And I felt like I immediately got to know them. And so when I logged onto the Zoom, addressing them by name was easy. I'm like, oh man, you're the one who like this, like that. Done. Saved so much time, but also kind of just set the tone for a very safe and exciting learning space, and in a hopeless place. Sorry. And with that said, I think we're just about at our time. So yeah, I think so. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to Dr. Chelsey Green. Thank you to Lizzie. I'm
Thank you,
Jess,
Lady
Lady Jess.
Thank you, Lady Jess.
Thank you for having us. Really quickly, we are going to just super fast at the end make our way out of this room so that they can set up for the next panel. If you'd like to contact any of us online, Chelsey, what is your handle?
Instagram at Green Violinist. I'm on Instagram at Green Violinist. You can email me info@chelseagreen.com.
Come on, email.
You know,
Let's
email
go.
or Insta is my preference, please. But
And Lizzie, what about you?
It's at Lizzie Harp, which is Lizzie, very important.
Yes.
_ Harp, HARP, and then my email is Elizabeth Steiner Harp, and Steiner is spelled STEINER, and then harp@gmail.com.
Beautiful. And I'm Lady Jess. I can be found on Instagram at Lady Jess Music. You can DM me for my email address. And thank you so much. Thank you again. Have a beautiful rest of your time here at Sphinx.